through the course of history, treasures have been set aside frequently to finance revolutions, to finance change in monarchs, to finance all kinds of geopolitical things. So there are several that come to mind. One is called the Lancastrian treasure, and it was used for the armies of the anti-Yorkists in the mid-1400s by the Anjou dynasty of Britain, the War of the Roses we're talking about here. And then there's something called lost Jacobite gold. And this is, I'm going to cite this, it's from BBC. On December 19th, 2007, BBC aired the feature, Beach Hunt for Lost Jacobite Gold. It's summed up below. Archaeologists hope to find missing gold sent to Scotland to help fund a Jacobite rebellion buried under a remote highland beach. A portion of the money was believed to have been hidden in Araseg near Mallaig in the 1700s. Neil Oliver, who is the archaeologist doing this, is leading the hunt for the gold for a new BBC Two series called BBC Two series called History Detectives. The money did not arrive in Scotland until after the Jacobites' defeat at the Battle of Culloden in April 1746. It was intended to finance Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charles, in his efforts against the British monarch George II, and put his father James Stuart on the throne. Oliver, an archaeologist, said the original complete sum of money sent from France may be worth 5 million British pounds today. What happened to the gold remains a mystery, however. Oliver said the clues to the possible location were contained in a letter believed to have been written in October 1746. He said, quote, "It appears to be a deathbed confession from a Jacobite who took some of the money and hid it. Apparently he was so tortured from having taken some of the money. He says in his letter that he didn't know what it was when he took it. Then when he found out that it belonged to his rightful prince, he made his confession to make sure it got back to its rightful owner." All that's known about this gold trove is that it came from French sources to finance the Jacobite rebellion. French sources could be New France, which is Quebec. It could be parts of New England. It could be, there could be any number of sources when you're saying French sources. In those days, you could narrow it down somewhat. Obviously, all the French were in favor of the Jacobite rebellion. So, I guess some people might think, unfortunately, the gold arrived kind of late after the last great uprising and rebellion, was lost. But here's the point. We're talking here 1746. There was an artifact found by the first European supposedly to set eyes on the Rocky Mountains, La Vérendrye, Louis Joseph the Chevalier, the son of Pierre Gauthier de La Vérendrye, who often gets credit for this, although he wasn't in the scouting mission when this happened. January 1st, 1743, the La Vérendrye scouting mission finds this great big sandstone pillar with a hollowing. They take this stone out of the hollowing, and there's this inscription on the stone. Long story short, they get that stone into the hands of the Governor General of New France and the Jesuits, and it is then shipped, according to three of the primary authors of this history. It was shipped in the early 1740s, 1744. According to Alexander von Humboldt, the founder of the science of ecology, of volcanology, of geography today, the great Humboldt, the Humboldt Current, Humboldt Mountains, Humboldt Saskatchewan, and Humboldt all over the place, he knew that artifact actually was shipped in 1746, the same year that the gold was shipped to the Jacobites. Back in 2004, when I deciphered that code at Shugborough Hall, that's on the Shepherd's Monument, I deciphered a code that explicitly made reference to that stone and it arriving on Litchfield Estate. It turns out Litchfield Estate was owned by the Anson brothers, and George Anson was the one who had confiscated the stone in 1746. So now we've got a really interesting, complex issue. Le Jonquière, who was Governor General of Canada, of New France, not in that particular year, but in 1748, 49, because he in 47 was arrested by Anson doing the same thing, shipping goods back and forth, and he was put in prison in the Tower of London for 2 years, and he came back to Canada, to New France, and became the Governor General. But Le Jonquière, this is what I'm suggesting. Le Jonquière, as a theory, Le Jonquière is the person who had, with help, obviously, taken the gold, brought it in his fleet that divided up, and Anson himself apprehended several of the ships from in both years when he attacked the fleet of Le Jonquière. Le Jonquière lost the stone because it was on one of the crippled ships that Anson took, but was able to continue with the ship that had the gold and eventually deliver it, but it was late. It was too late for the Jacobites to use it. We know, according to Alexander von Humboldt and Carolus Linnaeus' prize student, Carolus Linnaeus is a founder of botany, after all, and taxonomy. We know what their accounts are of what it is that happened with the original stone that was taken by the La Vérendrye scouting party. And it's in their recordings that you find all these little bits and pieces of clues about there being something else going on. And given that Alexander von Humboldt bore the Templar cross along with his brother, and that so too did Carolus Linnaeus' student, Père Combe, who did the initial interview with La Vérendrye about the discovery of this stone tablet. They all bore the insignia of the Templars, and which there are 3 different Templar crosses, and they bore all of them. So we know that 2 of them belonged to Vassa, which was a group that had actually supported the Jacobites. So in the big picture of all of this, because people were trying to protect their futures by not being overly committed to either the Glorious Revolution or the Jacobite rebellion that would put the House of Stuart back in place. It's hard. This group that I just referred to that wrote these accounts of the stone and of Le Jonquière bringing the stone back to France, and it never got there. They were all in the know about something, and it was Alexander von Humboldt who released the information when he said it was 1746, not 1743 or 1744, when this artifact was shipped. So to make this rambling story sensible, my conclusion is that the gold that was delivered in later 1746 was in company with that stone tablet in the same fleet, and that this all had to do with the Jacobites, as I had said back in 2004 in the account in the London Times, that much of the Jacobite rebellion was organized and instrumented out of Rosslyn Chapel area. They were all Jacobites, in that region, but for a few. So what's missing in the present series, and if they do a new series, I suspect, unless they bring all of us on for 3 or 4 episodes, I suspect that this same paradigm is going to be pounded out, and they're resorting to all the old stuff about Rosslyn Chapel, Priory of Sion at Rennes-le-Château, and so on, but from a different context. Get the story straight, and who the players were, and what was actually going on geopolitically at the time, and I think that the solution is going to become very, very apparent. Connect that to a thorough-going investigation of indigenous peoples' accounts in oral traditions and written traditions of what was going on in the 1500s, 16, 17, 18, 1900s in that region. And I mean, there are plenty enough oral traditions that have ended up recorded that are authentic, that have just not been studied. And so the question is begged, I think, why are these investigations discounting or omitting the Jacobite fact and the indigenous fact as being probably the pivotal, most central variables and components to all of the theorizations about the money pit on Oak Island?